Hey everyone, welcome back. Sorry for that little technical hiccup. We're here to talk about fruit beer this week. Now, we've got 4 fruit beers in front of us, only one of which isn't a sour. Now, we're going to dive right into the Phillips Benefit Brew Project Forest here. And we're going to talk about the beer first, then we're going to talk a little bit about why only one of our fruit beers today isn't a sour. Now, this is part of Phillips' series that they've had going on since about 2014-15. A little bit of Googling around. The earliest link I could find to something was in 2015, but they talked about it like they'd done it before, so it might have started a year earlier. Regardless, the big reason why most of you will know the Phillips Benefit Brew was that last year, the year before, 2019, Lethbridge charity was actually one of the charities that was involved with Phillips Benefit Brew. The Old Man Watershed Council had a benefit brew beer that we sold here in the store, and they had on tap at least at the Owl. It might have been a couple other places. I went to the release party at the Owl, where I think they actually sold out 3/4 of the draft in 8. It was a crazy, crazy night. Cans didn't stick around here long either. It was a hazy Kolsch that was just about the best beer I tasted. Even our growler station, like, sometimes things go on the growler station, they go through really fast. Sometimes things go on the growler station and they die. But it actually sold out in like 3 or 4 days. It was absolutely bananas how well that did. While they haven't necessarily had the fanfare for it, they've continued to do it up to this day. And it's done very, very well. It just hasn't been so much in everybody's mind here because it didn't benefit charity. This one is going to Project Forest, which is reforesting about 176 in. Now, citrus lager, citrus in this case meaning lemon and tangerine. I don't like how soft and fruity this is. I like that it's just very simple and straightforward. Citrus and beer go together shockingly well. But then I'm one of those weird people who actually really likes lemon and chocolate together. Apparently my audio is choppy. You know anything about that? We don't know, but, you know, it's been the streaming software all day, so. Also, I am really pink in the picture. Maybe I'm just hot. Ah, well. Aaron's just having an off night. And it's the laptop, so let's just blame the laptop. That's fun. So, anyway, why aren't more fruit beers not sour? Well, fruit and beer have gone together for a very long time. As long as there has been brewing, there has been evidence of people putting fruit in beer. From some of the earliest beer examples that we have from Egypt, actually evidence of them putting dates in the beer. And the reason for this is pretty simple. I mean, generally speaking, the grain for the beer would be harvested about the same time as the fruit, unless you were harvesting something like apples that would sit and be able to be made into cider and would last all winter. The fruit started spoiling a lot faster than the grains. So you'd eat what fruit you could, make your preserves, but there was always some fruit left over that you really couldn't do much else with. So putting fruit into beer seasonally has been around about as long as beer. Right up until about 1516, when the Reinheitsgebot, or the Bavarian purity law, comes through, at which point fruit beer kind of takes a bit of a nosedive. Now, the Reinheitsgebot wasn't enforced globally. It was only really enforced initially in Bavaria and then throughout Germany. But it was really the very first kind of quality manual or treatise on how to make beer really, really well, how to make it clean, what should and shouldn't go into beer. And it certainly wasn't the first book about brewing. Like Nostradamus wrote a book about jam, quite literally. But there was lots of brewing manuals. The Reinheitsgebot was really influential because it was the first one approached it from a very scientific angle and tried to really justify, these things shouldn't be in beer because it, decreases the quality of the beer. Now, while not all countries were, enforced to use the Reinheitsgebot, they certainly were influenced by it, to the point where fruit in beer dried up because most brewers coming up looking for their first book on beer, the tradition going around was to brew to the Reinheitsgebot of 1516 standard. So while some fruit beers stuck around, most didn't. So why are most of the beers that we taste that are fruit beers sours? One, it goes really well together, but there was one part of the world where they really didn't follow that particularly closely, where fruit beers stayed a thing, and that was in the region of Brussels in Belgium, where the local beers were lambic, and as a result, of course, were sour. Now, fruit lambic is the best-selling style of lambic in the world. This is the Cuvée Rennais series from Lindemans, which is the unsweetened versions, but the best-selling lambics, and I believe the best-selling fruit beers worldwide, I'm wondering if something like Shock Top has now overtaken that, but historically they were always the best-selling fruit beers in the world because they were one of the very few fruit beers that was sold globally, and they were among the very oldest. So the Belgians, especially in Brussels, they kept brewing their famous sour-style beers right through the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. And once we got into the 20th century and the lambic breweries started dying out, even then, the style that they kept brewing because it kept selling were, okay, sweetened with aspartame, but they were these sweet, easy-drinking, lightly tart fruit beers. Not too terribly long ago, probably 6 months ago, I actually had, because a friend of mine had it, one of the sweetened Lindemans beers. And okay, not really my taste. Better than I thought it was going to be, though. Genuinely. The fruit also absolutely could add yeast. Of course, almost all fruit has what's called a bloom on it that is quite sticky and will have yeast stuck to it. Absolutely a great many fruit beers, if you add the fruit, it will also add yeast. But if you're adding cultured yeast, it should be more efficient than anything that's going to come in off of the fruit. Also, again, if you're adding fruit during the boil, it almost doesn't matter what's stuck to it. Most fruit beers that are made, at least that are supposed to be clean and not sour, they will have the fruit added at boil because otherwise you are going to end up with a sour beer unless you also then boil the fruit preserve. And once you're already boiling the fruit anyway, why not just put it in with the boil? You'll get a nicer flavor. So that's the long and short of it. One of the things I was kind of getting back to was I had somebody in the store long after I'd put together this tasting, and they were like, why are all your fruit beers sour? Why don't we have more fruit beers that aren't? And Mike and I were actually thinking about this. It's like, well, there's What the Huck, and now there's the brand new Cabin Yo, which is what we ended up selling them. But we really couldn't come up with another one. Like Old Man River, their blonde ale has citrus in it, but in terms of a beer that fruit is a major focus that isn't sour, they've kind of died off a little bit. Like I can remember selling a lot of Cannery Blackberry Porter. Wild Rose comes out with their Cherry Porter every Christmas, but I gotta say, there's not that many good non-sour fruit beers out there, which is kind of interesting, which makes this a little bit of an anomaly. So, citrus lager. I'll be honest, with the benefit brews, I always assume they're going to be a little worse than they are. And this goes back to that Old Man Watershed Hazy Kolsch. They were like, I was like, oh wow, we're getting a Phillips beer. They make such great IPAs. What are we getting for Lethbridge? Like, oh, it's a Kolsch. I'm like, oh, that's a kick in the balls, isn't it? I guess this is going to suck. And then it didn't. They'd hopped it really carefully. They'd made it in a very slightly New England style, and the beer was fantastic. And I kind of feel the same way about this. When I first heard about this, I was like, oh, it's a citrus lager. I was like, oh, good. It's going to be boring and with a tiny bit of lemon to it. It's going to be like Bud Light Lime. And it's anything but that. It's actually got a really pretty, like bright, fresh citrus character. You can tell it's an all barley beer because it's got that really nice cerealiness through the nose. In the mouth, it actually has some weight. I'm guessing this is about 5.5. I haven't actually looked, so forgive me here. 4.8. That's actually a little less alcohol than I thought it was going to have. Thanks, Mark. Good night.
Night, Mark.
Is the Medicine Hat Blood Orange a sour? No, and that's actually another good one. Medicine Hat's Burnside Blood Orange. I did forget about that one. That's also a really nice beer, and we sell buckets of that. Yeah. Like, no kidding, like 6-8 flats a week. Not all out the front door. It goes to a couple of restaurants as well, but a surprising amount off the shelf. Which kind of goes to show that maybe we need to see more fruit beers. Maybe it's an underserved category right now, because I've had more people asking about this bloody Cabin Yo, which is a salted dragon fruit wheat ale with amchur, or dried mango powder, and lemon. It's a lot. Like, that's actually why I brought the cans up. It was A, to show off the lovely packaging, but mostly I couldn't remember what was all bloody in this one because there's so damn much. And it is absolutely fantastic. Mike in particular is over the moon about this Yo. He loves it. I want to say, Eric, that the Burnside Blood Orange is an ale, but now you've got me doubting myself. And we're not going to get into those blueberry vanillas. I'm thinking of the Babe Blueberry Vanilla. I don't think that's a good flavor combination. They come off like blueberry pie and they're just too sweet. There's a couple of 3 of those blueberry vanillas out there. I think all of them would be better as a sour, because if they were sour, they'd basically be Jamrock, and Jamrock is a lot better than those beers. So yeah, kind of a bit of a diversion here. We dug a little bit into fruit beer history, but I don't know. We got that question and it kind of threw me, and that was what I wanted to open with because it's an interesting point. You know, it's one of those things where if you want a fruit beer these days, it's like, well, you're probably going to get a sour. Why? Because fruit sours are delicious. And it's really taken over the market. It's not just here. I actually had to look around on Liquor Connect very briefly, and again, it's really hard to search for fruit beers on Liquor Connect. I basically took a random sampling of beers and kind of looked at what ones were out there that were fruit beers that weren't sours. It was less than 10%. By quite a margin, it was less than 10%, which is kind of interesting considering that sours really weren't a thing, you know, even 5-6 years ago on the broader market. And fruit beers have been around since forever. So yeah, kind of interesting. I think there might be a little bit of a market for more stuff like the Yo here that isn't sour, because just like really good wheat beers, this was another conversation I was actually having with a customer, I think on Friday. There aren't that many just straight wheat beers out there. I mean, there's the classic German stuff like Paulaner, and if you really hate your life, there's Hogarden. But beyond that, there really aren't that many wheat beers anymore. Like 88's Hologram's gone, and past that, I don't think there's that many wheat beers. Oh, Far still makes a kick-ass one. I shouldn't leave out Far. Far's Hefe is fantastic. Lots of fruit milkshake IPAs as they seem to be making a comeback. I haven't seen the comeback of milkshake IPAs, and I really don't know if there's a difference between a milkshake IPA and like a hazy IPA with fruit and a whole bunch of sugar. We tasted something earlier today that I think could have been described as a milkshake IPA. I can't say what it is because I don't know if it was actually announced yet, and I don't want to spoil the party. It's something I might be getting. But yeah, it was a sample from a friend brewery that was definitely a fruited, heavily hopped beer with a bunch of sugar in it. That's basically a milkshake IPA, but they're not labeling them as that anymore. Like if you had, you know, Night Gallery with pineapple, is that a milkshake IPA? It's got the hops. It's definitely got some sugar to it. It's got some fruit. Is it a milkshake IPA? I'd make an argument it is, but they're not using the word anymore, which is interesting. Yeah, and I think Eric's got it right on the nose.
With the puke emoji?
No, not with the puke emoji. With his, maybe PR people don't like the word milkshake either. And I think that's probably as accurate as anything else. When I think milkshake IPA, I tend to think of Hell's Basement Brewing's The Yard. And have they never brought back the really good one? They just stayed on pineapple. And I always thought pineapple was the worst of the yards. And they just stayed there forever and ever and ever and never went back to the much superior blackberry. Anyway, that's a digression. Let's move on. Now, we do have 3 sours, all of which are a little different from each other. We're going to go with Snake Lake first. This is their Siesta, Fiesta, Margarita Citrus Goza, which is a heck of a mouthful. And this is, again, for them returning to that Mexican theme. They had their Taco IPA. They've done a couple of other ones that had a bit of a Mexican theme to it. I also noticed that on the can here, they actually give you like a recipe for a beer cocktail with tequila, Cointreau, and citrus and honey. I haven't had that yet, but it sounds pretty good. Kootenai River Raspberry Sour. I'll keep an eye out for that, Justin. Thank you. I've not been shown anything by Wild North yet. I don't know if they're in Alberta yet, but if they are, I'll keep my ear to the ground because I really like cranberry. Not as much as I like lingonberries, which is why I'm really excited for the Moody, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So, Margarita Sours. These kind of cocktail styled sours have been around for a little while. Spectrum Brewing, the ones in BC, not the one here in town, they've kind of done a bit of a specialty of doing these. They've had their Melon Ball Pale Ale, they've had their Margarita Sour, they've had their Pink Lemonade Sour. They have all these ones that are, they actually have a mixed pack of sours that they're calling Margarita Machine right now. These kind of cocktail-inspired sours work really, really well. And I don't think anybody does it quite as well as Snake Lake. I don't think anybody watching is going to be, you know, surprised that I really like Snake Lake's beer. But the amount of fresh lime that just jumps out of this glass is really something. Now, this bills itself as a citrus sour. We all agreed we kind of liked this beer. The level of like fresh citrus that comes out of this citrus sour versus this Snake Lake is completely on another level. The fresh lime on this is so bracing, so delicious. It doesn't smell like it's already in a beer. It just smells like fresh lime, and I love that. Now, you're obviously missing the tequila note, but just that mouth-filling fresh lime. I would argue that I don't think you can make a non-sour ale that has this much citrus zap to it because you need the acidity, and to have that much acidity, you need it to be a sour. But that's just the magic sometimes of sour ales, is the base beer can be so neutral, so in the background, that you can really just play around with it and you can end up with something really, really special. I quite like this. 3.8% alcohol. This kind of came in, I think, in a week where a lot of other stuff came at the same time. And I think some people maybe gave it a miss, or it came out on the week of a long weekend, because this is one that I think has sat around a little bit more than it ought to have, because I really like it. Goza is a very particular style. It's a German style, and it was a style for a salted wheat ale. If you remember, I was talking about before that, you know, the Reinheitsgebot kind of banished fruit from beer. They actually were wildly unsuccessful in actually making the Reinheitsgebot stick all through Germany. Places like, I forget where Goza is made. It's not in Cologne, it's somewhere else in Germany. I cannot remember the name of it. Basically, they said, well, no, salt is part of our local tradition. We're not stopping salting the beer. If you say we have to add water, fine, we'll just start adding seawater. Is that what you want? So basically, the Reinheitsgebot, they tried to impose it on all of Germany, but in terms of local styles, there was some pushback that said, no, this is our local tradition. You can't change that. Go away. So there were still some sours. Berliner Weiss in Germany. The reason that Berliner Weiss, until very recently, has never been fruited was that the beer actually had to get to the bar in accordance with the Reinheitsgebot. It couldn't have fruit in it. And then at the bar, they would have between 4 and 8 different fruit syrups that would be added when you ordered to actually make it into a fruit beer. But they would make the same base beer rather than making, you know, 4 or 8 different versions right from the brewery. And again, in the old days, that wasn't a problem because people didn't buy packaged beer to take home. If they were going to get beer to go home, they'd probably buy a growler, which in those points was literally a bucket with a lid that you had filled at your local bar. So no, this that wasn't really a problem. You could flavor your growler just like you could flavor your pint. And yes, salt is the big difference there on Goza. Although salt is kind of creeping in a little bit everywhere. I mentioned that this is salted. I've seen a little bit of salt starting to creep its way into IPAs, and it makes sense. I mean, what does salt do in terms of flavor in your mouth? It makes things that are very strong in alcohol taste less alcoholic. It makes things that are sweet seem a little bit more balanced. It makes things that are a little bit acidic taste a little less acidic. They make things that are fruity taste even fruitier. It's just a flavor enhancer. It's okay, this is going to be controversial. It's really not that different from MSG in a lot of ways, in the sense that it's just almost a universal flavor enhancer. And if you're going to salt a beer, even if you don't perceive that it's salty, even at low levels, you are actually going to have that change the nature of the beer. And this goes right back to the way that brewers sometimes will adjust their own water. And the process is very often called Burtonizing, or using Burton salts. This is named for Burton-on-Trent in the UK, which has very, very famous water for making English-style ales like bitters and pale ales and that sort of thing. A lot of the early breweries, including Sierra Nevada, actually used tons of Burton salts, whose point was not to make the beer salty, it was to adjust all of the natural minerals and the pH of your water before you brewed with it be exactly the same as Burton-on-Trent in England. So using salts in the broader sense, as in terms of adding minerals or adjusting pH to beer, goes back a very long way. And Eric is just jumping in here with exactly what I'm saying. Like before I even get there, he could actually be teaching this thing. So, the tragic seawater Goza wars. Yes, well, the world will never be the same. We lost so many good people. I also like that this is fairly low alcohol at 3.8. I like a good double IPA as much as the next person. I'm really coming to appreciate, as I get older and hangovers get so much worse, when somebody can pack this much flavor in something that's under 4% alcohol. I really do appreciate it. I know that I started this thing, at the start of COVID, it's like, Mr. IPA should be 7% alcohol again. No, I've come full circle. Lower alcohol is better. That one's going to be hard to beat for me. I really like that. When it comes to rankings, that's one with a bullet right now, but we got a bit of a ringer here. I'm the sort of person who literally goes to IKEA to buy jam because I really like lingonberries. I literally have gone to IKEA, ducked around all of the furniture, like avoided that whole section and just gone to the little cafe to pick up the lingonberry jam. I love the flavor of lingonberries. So like currants or cranberries crossed together and better than both. They have this absolutely spectacular character that I really like. When I saw that Moody was doing something that was at least in part lingonberry, I was all over this like a dirty shirt. So let's jump into this next. I will say, if you disagree with my tasting order on any of these, I'm right there with you. I think any of these could be tasted in almost any order. These two on the ends are so similar to each other, they could go side by side, and this go to the end because it's completely different fruit. I ended up just going in ascending alcohol order because I really didn't have a better answer than that. So we're going to jump in with the Moody Lingoncherry Sour here. We jump from 3.8 to 6.7. Oh, I haven't gotten to talking about Brighten the Corners yet. Aaron and I are going to be drinking some Brighten the Corners the second we're off camera here, because Brighten the Corners is... okay. It's my second favorite beer that Establishment has ever made, period. Including the stuff in the big bottles, including everything. My favorite is still Part-Time Model, the New Zealand Pils. That's set in stone. My love for that beer is well documented. Brighten the Corners, I think, is better than anything in their White Can series. It's better than Skyrocket or Afternoon Delight. It's better than any of their other one-offs. I really love Brighten the Corners. And I'm already like a pretty shameless Establishment fanboy. I really liked Brighten the Corners, and we just got it. I still have not had Brighten the Corners on tap. So I was in a massive hurry yesterday because I had 5 stops, because the only way I can get those awesome Uncommon ciders is right from Uncommon these days, because they have not been in Connect since like late April. So we now have all the Uncommon ciders again, but it's only because I'm driving to Calgary. I also had 2 home deliveries in Calgary, which was interesting. Good color.
Good color.
Gotta say, I'm getting something soapy on this and I'm not grooving. In the nose, there is something mildly soapy, and it's not my glass because I didn't get it on the other 2 beers. No, I don't have it on the growler bar. I didn't get a chance to taste Brighten the Corners until I got back last night, very late in the driving rain. I decided to have a beer while I unloaded the truck. I should have gotten a keg for the growler bar. I really should have. I didn't because it was just the new establishment beer and I was in a hurry, and I talked to Dave and he said, oh, it's really good. You know, some people saying that we should replace Afternoon Delight with it. It's so good. And then I got down here, I was like, I really should have got a keg of that. But I didn't because I was an idiot. Soapiness isn't in the mouth though. Not the tartest thing. I think that both the Tangerine Trees and the Siesta Fiesta definitely have more acidity, but it does have that lingonberry thing. I'm not 100% sold on the nose here, but once you get that in the mouth, there's the red berry. Again, it kind of comes off like cranberry, but it's got a little more depth to it. It's got a little more richness. It's got some of that almost vaguely white tea-like character that really good currants can have. It's got the cherries right up front, and I also love cherries. When it comes to lambic, like all of the cherries. My favorite lambic, probably going, as much as I love apricot and elderflower lambics, has got to be the Sharbiksi Creek from Driefontein, which is a fascinating beer. It uses Sharbik cherries, which are almost extinct because they're way too tart to actually eat.
Whoa.
They were entirely propagated as a crop for just the lambic industry, but when the lambic industry almost died in the 20th century, they basically tore out all the Sharbik orchards, to actually plant them with more commercially successful trees. And now there's only like, I think there's something 98 or 99 Sharbik cherry trees in all of Belgium, and they don't crop every year because they're really fussy to grow. So you can go like a 2-3 year gap where Driefontein just doesn't make a Sharbiksi Creek. And it's the most delicious cherry beer in the world. We've never sold it here. We've never seen it here. This goes back to my old school beer trading days when I was, getting Cantillon here for quite cheap and flogging it into the US for whatever the hell I wanted. Yeah, no, the Sharbiksi Creek is really special. This reminds me not so much of that in the sense that, yes, fruit skin is absolutely perfect. No soap from Craig.
I can't find the soap either, but
It might just be me. It can certainly just be my palate day to day. Yeah, fruit skin's really accurate though. Like there's a really nice, slightly tannic characteristic to this, and it ends up almost being not quite perfumed, but more aromatic than most berry beers are.
Could that fruit skin quality come from the fact that it's like twice as strong as what you get in the Gose?
It could be because the alcohol being a higher extraction rate, but I would be willing to bet that this would have been a fruit concentrate, not whole lingonberries and cherries. So I doubt that you'd have that thing. Again, most breweries, unless they're doing like a big bottle series, they're not aging on whole fruit just because it's so uneconomical. It's almost impossible to actually calculate your sugars in advance. Right. You run such a huge risk of infection. You can buy really, really, really high quality, like sanitized, sterilized fruit purees on the market as a brewery. It's almost not worth using whole fruit anymore. If you're doing it, it's probably for a gimmick because, again, homebrewers come at me here, but I don't think there's a big difference between using a really high quality fruit puree anymore and using whole fruit. And that's not because, I've lost my way and I've become, a total sellout and I'm going to start pushing Bud Light Lime next week or whatever fucking flavor Bud Light watermelon nonsense they're pushing. It's because I think the quality of fruit purees and fruit syrups has come up so much. It's not, just cherry syrup like you get out of a Diet Coke sort of thing. These are really high quality fruit syrups designed for the food industry and for the brewing industry. They're a very different product than what was on the market, say, 10 years ago. It's funny. I do have other beers from Moody, by the way. I have their Flamingos, or Flamingoza. I think it's more fun as Flamingos. Yeah. And I also have their Lavender Sour, which is very, very good. And it's probably our best seller from this brewery. Other fun thing about selling this tasting for 2 weeks and kind of having 2 weeks to build up to it. We're actually out of the Lingoncherry sour already, and we're getting thin on the benefit brew. Still have quite a bit of Tangerine Trees. I actually picked up another flat yesterday, and I have at least one more flat of Siesta Fiesta. But yeah, I think this is already completely sold out. So that's the trick about doing these. They're very topical, and I always do the rare stuff, or try to anyway, because everything on the table actually today is seasonal. And next week, not so much, but next week's a brewery profile, so it's not supposed to be. Yeah, the soapiness I think is me, but I do definitely pick it up, and it's like an old-fashioned bar soap sort of thing, like Pear's soap or something, and I'm not sure where it's coming from. But it's definitely there for me, but it's probably not there for a lot of people. It's just me, I think. Oh, it could also be my glass shape, too.
Like Thrills?
Yeah, like Thrills sort of thing, that soapy gum. I'm going to stop talking about the... Yeah, Justin says the same thing, Thrills gum. Yep, right there, exactly that. All right, so let's talk about what we have coming up next week. And we actually don't have a special guest. I ended up not booking a vacation next week. I canceled. I'm still going to take some days off. You know, don't worry about me. I'm not working myself into the ground any more than usual. But I am not going away. So I will be back next week. And we'll be doing Category 12. Category 12 is a really cool brewery, started in 2014 by a chap named Michael Kuzik. His slogan is beer worth leaving your career for. And there's a story to that. He actually has a PhD in microbiology and biochemistry. He spent his entire career setting up like high-end research labs, but he'd been a home brewer since like the 90s. He'd been doing this forever, cooking up big batches of beer on a stovetop, and eventually he said, no, I'm just going to make beer. So he founded Category 12 in 2014. Super cool West Coast style brewery. He makes an ESB. We actually have an ESB back. We've got an East Coast and a West Coast IPA. And then he has a rotating listing in Connect, which is a raspberry vanilla sour this time. But their sour is just listed as sour on Connect. So you order, you get what you get. When we actually ordered this, we thought we were getting the dry hop sour. We got raspberry vanilla instead. So that is coming up next week. I have reached out to the agent from Untapped to be a special guest. He did not get back to me before 6 o'clock when we went live. He probably got back at 6:01. So yeah, okay. I'm not crazy. Other people are getting the Thrills thing. Good. Okay. So Tangerine Trees. Now here's a fun one. They've been on a bit of a theme, and I had picked up some of it, but not all of it. A lot of their fruited sours lately have all had lyrics from Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Of course, everybody knows Marmalade Skies. They also had Cellophane Flowers and... Oh, bloody hell, I forgot. I even looked up this earlier. Yes, so Marmalade Skies, Kaleidoscope Eyes, and Cellophane Flowers. And this is kind of tying the three beers all together. Marmalade Skies, of course, was a citrus zest sour, so this has the citrus zest. Cellophane Flowers was heavily, heavily dry hopped. I actually loved that beer. Nobody bought it, but I loved it. This also has a heavy dry hop to it. And Kaleidoscope actually had really, really high alcohol, and this is also done as an Imperial sour. So it's kind of tying the other three in the Lucy series together. So they kind of come as a foursome here. And this takes elements from the other three and ties it all together. Despite being called Tangerine Trees, does not actually contain tangerine. It contains a heavy dry hop and orange zest. And I think this is pretty ripping. Yep, there's the orange zest, and there's the dry hop as well. It's way more subtle than it was with Cellophane Flowers. Cellophane Flowers was a passion fruit dry hop sour, and the dry hop definitely overran the passion fruit. Here, it's an orange sour with the dry hop kind of adding a little bit of balance to it, and I think that's a better balance. Yeah, that orange just, this works for me really well. I mean, oh no, what a surprise. Kyle likes an establishment beer. I know I'm predictable as anything, but I really like that. That's got such a beautiful, rich, balanced roundness to it that you get the hop, you get the fruit, you get the tartness. it's definitely a weighty beer. 8% alcohol. You are definitely feeling that viscosity, that power in the mouth, that mouthfeel. This is special to me. And the other thing I will point out is, okay, they needed 8% alcohol to get this. I could have 2 of those and have drank less than one of those. I mean, there's something to be said for pulling it all together and saying we can do exactly the same thing at 3.8. Now, I know that I'm casting aspersions of this for absolutely no good reason, that a beer that's done like this, tying together the idea of an Imperial sour and a dry hop sour and a zested sour, this is a really cool concept. I kind of wish they'd all come out at the same time, so we could have the Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds 4-pack and we could have all 4 of the beers together. That would have been amazing, because all 4 were really neat and they all were really different. But I mean, I own the store and I don't have any of the other 3 anymore, so even in the back of my fridge. So yeah, that's tied together so well. If anybody actually does have the other 3, I'd really love to try them, but I asked at establishment and they said they didn't have, well, they had a little bit of cellophane flowers, but they didn't have anything really. Okay, rankings, and this one is going to be hard for me. Well, I say that, I think I've got the same rankings as everyone else. 4, 2, 3, 1. You know what, I as much as I sang the praises of this, as much as I love the fact that it's lower alcohol, there's just so much going on in Tangerine Trees. How do you not respect that level of brewing? Terry's at 4, 3, 2, 1. Chad's at 4, 2, 3, 1. I think we've definitely got a distinct winner and loser in a squishy middle. I would actually put them 1, 2, 3, 4. I definitely could make a case either way here. I could make a case either way here, but there's a gulf between them for me. And it only took 1.5 years, but Deirdre and Craig actually agree on a ranking. 2, 4, 1, 3. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that one. That was actually a lot of fun. Totally. Aaron, do you have a ranking for me?
I liked that Phillips brew.
Did you?
Not like a number 1 liked. Like I like the Margarita Gose for like as number 1, I think.
So Aaron's 1?
Yeah, I would say I am those 2, right? Yeah, 2, 4, 1, 3. I think is my.
I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's just fine.
I think that's where I'm at.
Cool. All right. And actually, as it happens, Heather came back with 2, 4, 1, 3. So you've got a friend in Heather there. There we go. All right, folks, that was fun. That was Fruit Beer Week. We will be back at you 1 week from tonight with Category 12. And maybe some information about Fall Scotch Tasting Season 2021.
Nice.
We've put a lot of work into it. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but we got some ideas. And I'll at least let you all know what I'm thinking, even if we don't necessarily have a public plan. I'll at least walk you through the work that we've done, where our heads are at, and why we've decided to go the direction we are very likely to go. But all of that next week. Talk to you all again. Good night.